everyone. Happy Friday. It is just after 5 o'clock here in Prague, and today I am so excited to be doing a live all about fasting and carnivore. And I'm going to be joined by Dr. Cecily, who is the fasting doctor here on Instagram. Let us know where you guys are tuning in from, where you're watching from. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, you two. How are you?
Good. I have a stowaway, not a stowaway, but he woke up a little early, so I'm going to put a pacifier in his mouth, and then we will have a great discussion. Can you say hi to everybody?
Hi. Oh, what a cutie. How's your Friday going so far?
It's going well. Today, I'm off, so was able to break away from the hospital. So that is nice for a little bit. So
Oh,
just
great.
hanging out with the kids, and our schools are closed here. So we're doing a little, learning at home and just trying to get used to a new routine.
Awesome. Well, we got people tuning in from all over the place here. We've got Austin, Texas, Canada, California. We've got Alberta, Canada.
Oh, wow.
Hello from Mexico, Killeen, Texas, Scotland, Los Angeles. Someone said, sweet baby.
Oh, thank you.
Hello from California. It's great to see where you guys are all tuning in from. I'm in Prague. And we've got hello from Nigeria. Really all over the world today.
Nice, nice. How are things in Prague right now?
Things are good. So we've been under a strict, very, very strict lockdown here
Okay.
for 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if you've seen anything on the news, but Czech has managed to flatten the curve with Corona because of this strict lockdown, quarantine, and also from making everyone wear mandatory face masks.
See, that's nice. You guys are ahead of us. Mm.
Yeah, so it's there's really been like very few cases here at all, and it's really been well contained. So, we thought some of the measures were extreme at first, but they followed Singapore and Taiwan,
Yes.
and they really got great results. So yeah, I've been indoors for the past 2.5 weeks, except for one day. I went to the post office, and last night we had a virtual dinner party with some friends
Oh, nice.
who live like 10 minutes away. But we just, instead of going over to their place, we did a virtual catch up, and they had some wine, and we just caught up for like 2.5 hours, just hung out together. So I guess we all were kind of needing that.
Yes. Yeah, we did something like that a couple weeks ago. We had like a virtual Zoom, party, and then we let our kids they did like Zoom with some of their friends just to say hi and check in. So I know it's a pain for everyone to stay inside, but it's definitely needed. And we want to try to, like you said, Vanessa, flatten the curve so that we can hopefully prevent as many deaths as possible. So, I mean, it really is important. I know it's inconvenient, but it really is important.
Yeah, I know last night, we were so tempted to just go over to our friend's place, but it's like, this is sacrifices we all have to make right now just to get through this and get through it as quickly as possible, and with
Right.
the least amount of casualties. And every physician like yourself and frontline health worker that I speak to, I'm like, what can we do? And they're like, stay home,
Yes.
self-isolate, please. It's
Yeah.
the best thing you can do to help us. So
Is to stay home. No, you're right. And it's just, like I said, it won't last forever, but I tell people, at least in the States, because we have not had mandatory states by states are doing it. So like Kansas has enacted it, but then Missouri hasn't, and we share a border with them. And so one of my friends had this great analogy, and it's like when you don't mandate that everyone stays home, it's like having a peeing section in a swimming pool. And I was like, you're right, because eventually it just keeps trickling and diffuses. So it really is. I think that's awesome what your country has done. I mean, like where you're at right now. And
Yes.
so hopefully more will continue to follow suit and just really, do that. So we'll see how that goes. Wyatt, I'm gonna pass you off to Daddy. Say bye.
Bye.
All right. And here's his fast five. Thanks much. All right. Okay. So but anyway, I know people didn't tune in to listen to me rant and rave and go on and on about coronavirus. So,
Yeah, it's the one distraction, I guess, we have is like our social media and stuff. Although I think it is relevant still to talk about it. Actually, one of the questions we had on my post was about it. I'm not sure if you saw that one. But yeah, like you said, our topic is fasting and carnivore. So if you guys have live questions too, we'd love to take them.
yeah. And I know I had a few questions. One, I mean, I think people who follow you, Vanessa, are pretty familiar, with your kind of progression and how you went from kind of, or still keto, but how you're doing more of a keto carnivore now. But I know some of the people that follow me are not as familiar with carnivore. So for those who just maybe don't know what it is or what it's all about, can you give kind of just like a overview of what carnivore is and how
Yeah,
you kind of integrate it into your life?
I would love to. So there's lots of different definitions out there of it, and there's different variations of it. But the way that I approach carnivore is that it's an animal product diet. So you're basically just eating foods that are animal based. And so animal proteins, all the proteins you can imagine, every animal that, we consume, beef, seafood, chicken, um, all the poultry, all the seafood, all the ruminant animal meats, and eggs. And then some people also, I mean, dairy is considered carnivore diet as well.
Okay.
And then some people will include other things, in it like honey and things like that. I don't.
Okay.
So for me, my definition of it is just the animal proteins, and I don't do a lot of dairy,
Right.
but the carnivore diet does include dairy, so it's part of it. But for me, dairy is more of an occasional treat, and my day to day is just all animal products. So that's kind of how it's defined.
And then what do you say? So things that I'll hear commonly are, well, how do you get all of your nutrients if you're not having fruits and vegetables? I think that's like the biggest thing. People are like, how can you do that?
Yeah, and it's such a great question. So what a lot of people don't realize is the most nutrient dense foods that exist really are animal foods. So foods, I have some different charts that I've posted on my profile, but showing comparisons between the foods that we commonly are taught are the most nutrient dense are like vegetables and fruits, as these are the superfoods. But when you compare those to foods like just beef and like liver, like chicken liver, turkey liver, not only are the nutrients, the minerals and nutrients in them much, much higher, but
Mm-hmm.
they actually are a lot more absorbable. It was the first thing I learned when I was in university in nutrition, my nutrition 101. It was, I think, the very first class was, there's all these vitamins, nutrients, fat absorbable, water soluble, fat soluble vitamins. There's all these different minerals, everything, but the most absorbable come
Mm-hmm.
from animal products and meat. So it's really amazing. I make it a big point to eat liver every week. I eat chicken and turkey liver, and I
Hmm.
eat my chicken and turkey liver pate. And anyone who follows me sees me post it every
Yeah.
week because it's so delicious and it's such an easy way to get so many minerals. I make it with bone broth as well, so it's got
Hmm.
added minerals in it, but it's one of the most nutritious foods on the planet.
Mm.
And, you know, I make sure to eat it I eat it most days, I eat it daily, but every single week it has to be part of the diet to make sure that it's extremely nutritious. But many carnivores don't supplement with organ meats or with liver, and they've been
Uh,
thriving on it as well as eating beef, because just beef itself is so nutrient rich and nutrient dense.
okay. No, and it's interesting too because you'll see a lot of people who, there's lots of stories of people who were in struggling with health issues. One of the questions I got on my profile was, carnivore and autoimmune disease, or carnivore and just the immune system in general. And you'll see people who've had like all of these issues, and they basically end up on carnivore as kind of like an elimination diet or protocol. So they like cut out a lot of things. And then I've seen or heard stories of people when they try to add back certain things one by one, they're like, oh, that flares my whatever, that flares this symptom. And they end up just cutting it all out and thriving on meat. And so I just find that very fascinating in general.
It is. It absolutely is, and it's the ultimate elimination protocol. And you'll find like with little things, because I mostly just eat meat myself, and then but I love condiments and spices like mustard.
Mhm.
I love having mustard, and I love I make mayo with bacon fat, and I also use
Mhm.
spices, and I love hot sauce, and I'll put spices and pepper in my pate, and I'll have hot sauce, and I wake up usually the next day with a little bit of a sore back that I don't normally
Mhm.
have. And so I'm aware that that's there, and it's probably either the pepper, which is a seed, or the hot sauce because the
Okay.
nightshades in it, but I can reduce it, and I know when I'm eating it, I'm like, okay, I know my back might be a little sore when I wake up tomorrow. I really want to have some hot sauce. So like
Right.
those things, it's not unbearable. It's just like I'll wake
Mhm.
up feeling sore as opposed to, not feeling completely pain free. So I think that happens to a lot of people where they go and experience that, and then they go back and you realize,
Mhm.
well, I used to wake up with a sore back every day, but I just
Mhm.
tolerated it. And then when you
Mhm.
you experience life without that, and then you go back, you're like, well, maybe I'd rather just be pain free all the time. So I
Right.
think that's probably partly what happened with me as well. Is like I tried it for a month, and happens to a lot of people where they end up feeling so good
Mhm.
that they just want to keep doing it, and then they'll add something back in and they don't feel as good, so it's like it's just
Right.
easy to stick to.
Right. And I think it also just makes us more aware of what of the fact that food really can play a role, or really does play a role in our overall health. I sometimes I feel like people think it's hokey, or they're, when people say, well, food is medicine, and I'm like, no, the problem is we just don't ever pay attention to those cues, right? So like you said, the sore back example, we're just like, oh, I have chronic lower back pain. And so we've just
Right.
become a society that just expects that we have many chronic conditions. And so it's kind of like, well, we have serious chronic conditions, and then we have just the daily ones, but we just have kind of accepted that life has some form of ache or some form of pain. It's just, how great is it? And if it's really bad, you'll go to the doctor, right? And if it's just a little bad, then you just deal with it, right? And I don't think people realize that, well, you don't have to really have any symptoms, you know?
Right.
Um, and if we optimize our fasting, obviously I'm a big fan of fasting, and then also optimizing nutrition, like there's a lot of things that don't have to bother us.
I 100% agree, and you really don't know how good you can feel until you've experienced it. And,
Right.
you know, you realize like, oh, I've been compromising all these years. I've just been accepting that soreness here, that ache here, you know, just accepting it as like, this is what being human is. And when you do these powerful protocols like carnivore and fasting, you get all the anti-inflammatory benefits
Mhm.
from it. You know, you get all this healing that happens from removing all these foods that could be triggering, you know, everything from autoimmunity to pain. And it's amazing when you do experience it. It's such a whole level, like a new level where you're like, I wake up in the morning, I'm pain free the whole day,
Mhm.
I feel great, and I love moving and being in my body. I'm never sore, you know, and you
Right.
really, really, like you said, you don't know until you've experienced it.
Right. No, I think so. I mean, I just tell people to be open-minded and play around with different things and see what works for you. I am headed to your page because I want to pull up some of the questions too, um, that were on your page. So let me just get my
Yeah,
Instagram
we've
to
got
go
some
there.
comments here. I'll just read while you pull
Okay,
it
we can start
up.
with that. Yeah.
So Wolf says, yes, you only have to stay at home. Absolutely. Laura is asking, how should I break a long-term fast if I'm carnivore, i.e. bone broth, I guess. Is it okay to
Hmm.
sip on store-bought bone broth? I know it's not ideal, just an option. Thanks.
Hmm. So I don't know. I'll let you take that one because I am not carnivore myself. So I mean, I don't know. Have you noticed the difference in how you've had to break your fast, Vanessa, being carnivore when you were not carnivore? Was there any difference on your gut?
No, but I know that people who are not carnivore, if they do extended fasting, they'll say things like, break your fast with some juice or a salad or some nuts, or, you know, these like a soup or something that's, you know, like pure, like pureed or like already broken
Hmm.
down kind of foods and things. And I always thought like that doesn't really make sense
Right.
anthropologically. Like if we go back in our history and you hadn't hunted or had food in a while, and then you successfully hunted an animal, you weren't going to say, hold on, I
Right.
just got to get some leaves from that bush, I'll be back, and then let's wait half an hour and then let's eat this, you know. Like it doesn't, that never made sense to me.
Right.
I figured you're starving and you would probably
You'd
just
eat.
eat, you know. So um, but a lot of people say with an extended fast, it's in a really long time, you want to just kind of warm up your stomach a little bit. What I like to do is I usually like to have some of my pate.
Hmm.
Um, I do the liver pate, or I'll do, it has broth in it. So I'll have just a little bit of that to sort of wake up, like they say, wake up your stomach, wake up your digestive
Right.
system, and just not rush into eating, like just kind of have a little bit at a time while I'm preparing my first meal, and just get things like blood flowing, circulating, and all of that, as opposed to doing anything specific. Some people say bone broth. If you like that, do that. I find the food that you have after an extended fast tastes the best.
The best food.
Yeah, I love eating really nutritious foods, and the liver pate, and just like a lot of, I'll do more leaner meats and things so that it's not, you're not
Hmm.
overwhelming your system with like a lot of heavy, high, like fat meal
Yeah.
where you're gonna have to secrete a lot of like bile and that kind of thing. So that's what I personally like to do, is just have a small bite and then like a moderate sized meal, not like a huge, huge carnivore meal.
Hmm. And to piggyback off what you said in terms of, also you mentioned, you know, maybe not having a meal that's very high in fat. So not that fats are bad by any means, but if you've been on an extended fast, personal experience. So I didn't know that when I first started fasting. Like I was just playing around with stuff, and so I did an extended fast. And I had a smaller meal to break. It really wasn't anything too heavy. but maybe about, oh goodness, maybe it was maybe like 8 or so hours later, I remember I had like mozzarella cheese, like tons of it, and tomatoes, and like just a bunch of, because then I was like, oh, I want to eat all these different things. And so because they were all whole foods, I was like, oh, it should be fine. Um, but it wasn't. And I had probably some of the worst GI distress I ever had. So I always tell people after that experience, I'm like, it's fine to eat a meal, but make sure, like you mentioned, that they're smaller portion. Don't just necessarily go all in, because you can get some GI distress. And so since I like kind of did more of a gradual feasting, kind of space things out, smaller portions, but did eat, I noticed when I do an extended fast, I don't have any GI distress from that anymore. But yeah, the first time after I did an extended fast, that was not pleasant.
Yeah, it's
Live and learn.
yeah, exactly. Live and learn. But yeah, it's really nice to just take advantage of that time to eat the most nutritious foods too that you wouldn't maybe normally have. Like salmon, wild caught salmon is one of the most nutrient dense foods, and a lot of people are not that into seafood, but if you have foods like that like some liver pate, some salmon, the foods that maybe you think of as like um not as exciting or appealing,
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to taste so good after a fast. And you're going to be rebuilding your tissues, your cells, all of that from that incredible food. So I like to prioritize the most nutrient dense food that you have, and oysters, like just all those like whole organisms, nose to
Mm-hmm.
tail foods are so good for after a fast.
Well, that makes sense too, because especially you would have been revving up autophagy. And so now, if you're going to start feeding your cells again, you want to make sure that they're incorporating healthy building blocks. I mean, it's kind of like you do this extended fast, you get all this great cellular cleansing, and then you just clog it back up again. So, I mean,
Exactly.
that would also make sense that, a lot of people will say, you'll hear it around different fasting circles, the meal that you break your fast with is probably just as important as the fast itself. So,
Yes, absolutely.
mhm, to keep that in mind. Um, let's see. Okay, so on the post, someone mentioned, how can we clean our, oh, okay, this is not fasting, but we can talk about it real quick. It says, the post
Yeah.
is, how can we clean our packaging from the grocery store? So I'm assuming this is like a Corona type question. So I can tell you what we do at our house. The You have like the bleach wipes that you can get,
That's what
the
I
bottle
used to.
wipes. Yeah, and so that's what we basically do. I have gloves, disposable gloves. So I'll put those on, and then we just wipe down the packages. If you're ordering stuff offline, so we've been trying to actually avoid the grocery store as much as possible. And so we've been doing a lot of home delivery. And so when the big box comes that everything's packaged in, we actually spray that with like our Lysol spray and let that stay outside for a little bit. And then we'll bring in the box, and then we disinfect again, wipe off the packages like that. So, and then always make sure afterwards that you wash your hands, because you don't realize how much you touch your face. And so that's what a lot of the benefits of the mask are. Whether or not you have access to a level 3 mask, just walking around in public, it prevents you from touching your face too. So that's what we've been doing. Um,
Yeah.
Someone else asked a question and said, it's Joe Fanners. It says, I've been keto for about a year and carnivore for the past 2 months, but I still feel like I'm obsessed with food, constantly thinking about what I'm going to eat next, and then overeating because I was just looking for food. I haven't been restricting calories, but know sometimes I'm eating more than I need. When will appetite correction happen? I've been intermittent fasting around 16 hours per day, but have found myself watching the clock help. Okay. I don't know about when did you have any issues with I know like when you cut out sweeteners when you were doing keto, you said that and you still are keto, but when you're cutting out the sweeteners that help with the cravings. But did you experience any cravings when you went carnivore initially?
I didn't, but you know what I do see quite often in all the carnivore groups that I'm in is that most people when they start, they will eat as much as they need to, like 3, 4, 5 pounds of meat a day at the beginning. It's really, really
Oh
common.
wow. Okay.
Um, and the people are kind of making up for many, many years of restriction. I know I used to be able to easily do like 3 pounds of meat a day, really, really easily when I first started. After a while, people's appetite tends to settle down and they'll go down to about half that and more like 2 pounds a day. But I see that over and over and over again. People saying like even for as long as 5 to 6 months at the beginning, they're
Oh.
because you're generally supposed to just eat totally ad libitum, like whatever, um, eat the food that you enjoy, eat the meat that you enjoy, eat it until it's no longer appealing. So a lot of times it takes a bit of time to reconnect with your satiety and your
Mhm.
fullness, for your hormones to correct in that, if you're coming from S.A.D or even coming from keto, if you've been really restricting protein. So I think the body has to rebuild some of those stores, and then after a while, it you see the same pattern over and over again. People say like after a few months, I just didn't need as much. So I would say if that person is constantly thinking about food and watching the clock, they're hungry, and just eat. Like don't intermittent fast. Just wake up if
Right.
you're hungry, have a meal. If it's after 8 p.m. and you're thinking about food, make a burger, like eat whatever you want or need to so that your cravings are satisfied. And if you are craving, it's probably because you're hungry.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point too, because I know me personally, or just others that I've worked with, there are times where, I could do a 48-hour fast and like breeze through it. And then there's other times where at 14 hours, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I want to eat. And so, sometimes it could be boredom and whatnot. And so I give myself a chance to see if it's other things. But like the person in this post said, if you are like constantly hungry or constantly thinking about food, your body also may be telling you like this isn't the time for fasting right now. Maybe this is the time to focus on nutrition. And the other thing I like to point out to people, like I know we all think, if you don't fast for 16 to 18 hours or 20 hours that you're not getting any benefit, but just gut rest, sunset to sunrise could be all that you need, at that point in time. So maybe for this person, while you're getting adjusted to carnivore, maybe not fast for more than 12 hours and like really, get your new way
Yeah.
of eating down first and then reintroduce longer periods of fasting so that you don't feel like you're, going crazy with trying to make all the changes at once. Could help. Um,
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's having like 3 meals a day is not a bad thing when you think, we're used to having like 6 to 8 eating opportunities in a day.
correct.
Going down to 3 is awesome. Like if you're not snacking between those meals,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be OMAD. OMAD can put a lot of pressure on the body of like trying to
Yeah.
get in all the whole day's nutrition in one meal.
Hmm.
If you wake up, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're not snacking outside of that, like pat yourself on the back because that's
Correct.
awesome.
Yes, and that's too. It's like I think we get into these misconceptions like you have to fast X amount of time or whatnot, but your food also is a great source of input. And so if you've made the switch to really prioritizing nutrient dense foods, you may not have to fast as long as someone else who isn't changing their diet. So, I mean, I think those are all, things to keep in mind too. Um, Someone else commented and they said, I've been paleo for 10 years, controlling Hashimoto's. Now I seem to need a little more help, especially with weight loss. I'm considering carnivore, but what about herbal supplements and seasonings? Are those okay? Also, newly diagnosed with Lyme disease, how can this diet potentially affect? So I think I've heard you mention before, and I don't know if this is still your school of thought, but that carnivore, I'm sure people can lose weight or do lose weight with carnivore, but that maybe keto is maybe a little more efficient at weight loss rather than carnivore per se, or did I like misinterpret that?
Yeah, so I think for people who are coming to carnivore for weight loss, they generally don't see a lot of weight loss. You see body composition changes, but the
Mm-hmm.
scale usually stays the same or goes up because people are building more muscle, they're burning more fat. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're just wanting to see the scale go down, you're probably not necessarily going to see that unless you're coming from like a S.A.D diet where you're doing 200 to 300 grams of carb per day, and then you're going from
Right.
that to like 0. But you can easily make up in calories for that if you're just overeating a lot of like fatty meat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If there's hormonal imbalance, so if you have metabolic syndrome or dysregulation there, and you need to first correct insulin, you want to be. I like a keto approach with intermittent fasting, and some, alternate day fasting, longer fasting, 2-3 day fast. That'll help get insulin down. Whereas if you just go right to carnivore and you're just eating like, 3, 4, 5 pounds of meat, and it's fatty meats, like you won't necessarily go right into weight loss. People claim that magically happens. I don't believe it. I don't see it. I observe a lot of things that happen in the carnivore groups and things, and I have seen like consistent success with people who do keto, moderating the protein so that
Mm-hmm.
they can correct insulin, and doing intermittent fasting and fasting. I think carnivore can be great for fat loss, but if you just want to lose weight on the scale, you're probably not going to see that. You're going to have to measure your body composition and go by inches in your clothing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so maybe, and it probably just depends on like what your goals are, and whatnot too. I think a good question always for anyone to ask themselves when you're trying a new approach, whatever that is, like what are your goals for doing it? And like what are you specifically trying to get out of it? And then I think like when you start with that in mind, then it kind of helps you determine what approach may be best for you at that time. And then realizing that your goals can change as well. Like, right? Like your goal initially may have been weight loss. And so maybe the carnivore approach right off the bat, if weight loss is your goal, may not be where you start with versus if you are tackling autoimmune conditions and you're trying to figure out what your triggers are, then maybe doing a very strict elimination protocol first, which would probably by default lead you to carnivore. And then, testing around that could be a different approach. So it just depends on what your goals are, I would think.
Yeah, and I just think that so much of weight loss, as we know, comes from correcting insulin
Mm-hmm.
and making our body sensitive to insulin again, getting insulin levels down because it's an anabolic hormone. It signals our bodies to store fat.
Right.
If insulin levels are really, really high, I mean, you can have your insulin levels tested, your fasting insulin, but if your insulin's really high and you go right to carnivore
Mm-hmm.
without necessarily first correcting that, that's why I like a keto approach at first with the intermittent fasting, because it's just so effective for getting insulin down. Whereas carnivore, sometimes a lot of protein can really spike insulin for people too. So it's just not necessarily the quickest route. If to getting there. But if you go keto and you do correct insulin, you're doing intermittent fasting for a while, and then you go carnivore, like I think you can see amazing results like that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and I mean, I think it makes sense. Um, the other part, which you touched on this earlier, just about some of the seasonings you use, but they were just wondering about herbal supplements and whatnot when you're doing carnivore. Do you have any supplements that you typically use, or you get everything pretty much from your food?
I do because I do nose to tail carnivore. So like I said, I have some of my pate every day. It's so nutrient dense and it's so rich in pretty much every vitamin, nutrient.
Hmm.
And I eat a lot of red meats, which is really full of, iron, B vitamins. So I don't think that there's a need to supplement with anything. The only thing that I supplement with is magnesium,
Okay,
besides
good point.
and I salt my food, but I don't take any herbal supplements. But I do love seasoning. So, I season my food with salt and pepper, and I know pepper can be one of those foods that can, because it's a seed, it can
Hmm.
cause issues for people. But I love spices and
Hmm.
seasoning. It makes food really interesting and tasty, but I just try to keep it to a minimum.
Okay.
And, especially like the nightshades and like paprika,
Uh-huh.
um, some spices can be more, can cause more issues than others, but
Mhm.
I like keeping spices and some condiments in there just because it just makes food like a lot more interesting than
Yeah.
like just having just plain meat. Like I can't imagine just having like meat and no like salt and pepper, no
Right.
like anything on it. It just and maybe I'll get there one day, or I don't know. I don't see the need to. But if you are sensitive to it, try cutting it out,
Hmm.
and fasting is a great way. Like if you I mean, that's really the ultimate elimination, like even
That's
more
true
than
too.
carnivore, right? So when you introduce things back in, then you can tell, like, if you don't feel as good.
Right. And try to reintroduce one at a time because I'll see people, they'll introduce like a combo. And then I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you which one it was because you like reintroduced like three things all at once. And so, which is it? So then you have to eliminate again and then go back through. So I do think it's important to pay attention. Someone also asked, how often can I safely do a 72-hour fast? I've been doing 42-hour fasts for months, but would like to push it a bit to get weight and body fat down. Thanks. Um, so for me, at least, it extended fasting, it just depends. I don't necessarily think you need to do extended fast even monthly. And I guess it depends on how you define it. So for me, I start to consider extended fasting once you're getting above like the 48-hour mark.
Yeah.
That's because, you can do alternate day fasting for a long time, and that's still sometimes anywhere from 24 to 36 hours. So that in itself, I don't think is a problem. But I do think if you're doing 72-hour fast, 5-day fast, if you're doing those too frequently, I think that's a stressor on the body. I usually don't do extended fast more than once every couple months. I'll do a 5-day fast. I do that. It ends up being maybe about like 4 times a year. So, like if I'm averaging it out. But I try not to do them more frequently than that. With that being said, when I'm not breastfeeding, I would do, 48-hour fasts once a month, and they didn't bother me at all. So that's what I found for me. I just think if you push it too far, too frequently, so like if you're doing 5-day fast a couple times a month and you're not really treating a specific medical issue, do you know what I mean? Like you're not part of a protocol that's actually trying to reverse like a specific medical condition, doing a guided water fast or something like that. you run the risk of stressing, especially the HPA axis. And I've seen people develop menstrual irregularities. And then everyone's all of a sudden like, oh, women shouldn't fast. I'm like, no, that's not saying that women shouldn't fast, but I don't know that anyone should be regularly doing 5-day fast a few times a month, for a long period of time, unless there was a specific something that you were treating.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. And, Dr. Peter Attia did a video saying, right now with coronavirus and
Right.
immunity being so important, don't do more than 48 hours because that's
Yeah.
when cortisol goes up.
Hmm.
So, that's probably good as a general guideline as well. Like overall, 48 hours already is huge. 36 hours is huge. Not eating between your meals is huge. Just
Right.
not snacking between 2 meals a day is 140 hours a week that you're not eating anything. I mean, all
Hmm.
that stuff really adds up.
Yeah.
72-hour fast, like you were saying, on a weekly basis seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like a lot of stress, of time that you're just like not able to have food and eat meals. It seems a bit excessive because all of this really has to be sustainable long term. So like if you do one, or two fasts a week that are 24 to 36 hours, like that's amazing. You're going to get great results from that. And then you can also keep up like pretty much like regular meals with your family. And, you're not like, there's a point where it becomes deprivation, I think,
Yeah.
and it just becomes like um, unpleasant and there's no real need for it. I think like you look at fasting clinics like the IBM, Dr. Jason Fung and Megan,
Hmm.
they get people just to do these like intermittent, these during the week, like up to 36 hours. And it's
Hmm.
very effective for people long term. And I'm sure you see that with your patients too.
Yes. And that's the thing too. I mean, one, piggybacking off of the coronavirus situation, I mean, we have to realize and remember that depending on the length of your fast, it can be a stressor on the body. And so right now, I think that, fasting 48 hours or 36 hours or less, I think that still has tons of health benefits, keeps your inflammation down so you're not battling multiple things at once. So I think practicing true intermittent fasting during this time period and also making sure to prioritize nutrient dense foods, try to get sleep, all of these things that overall help our bodies. Add in a little bit of exercise too. Obviously, I guess it's going to be indoor or socially distanced outdoor, but all of these things overall that we can just do to help strengthen our immune system is going to be our best bet. But I personally don't think this is the time to embark on extended fasting right now. And so, even my husband was talking about he was going to do maybe like, I think he was thinking of doing like a 72-hour or something like that. And I was like, you know, you'll have plenty of time to do a 72-hour fast. I was like, why don't we right now? Let's just keep up our regular intermittent fasting because now that's just a part of our lifestyle. But let's not, push it too far right now because I just think that this probably isn't the best time to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep stress low and, um, you know, make yourself strong, nourish your body well, and you can do so much fasting just between your meals.
Right. And like we said, the 12 hours too. Don't forget, just not eating after dark. And now it's getting lighter out. So, I mean, after dark here is almost like 7:30, 8 p.m. So
Right?
just once the sun sets, stop eating and then have breakfast in the morning if you want. That's still about 12 hours. That's huge, especially if you're going to cut out snacking between meals and you'll get health benefits from that.
Yes.
Um, Someone asked so two questions. One, as a nurse, I know the health benefits. How do you recommend educating other healthcare people who believe the standard American diet or S.A.D diet is the best way to eat and care for patients? And then what would you recommend if one can't tolerate organ meat like liver? Um, the S.A.D diet, I mean, the good thing is I think more people, and that's why we're having this discussion today, right? I think more people and more healthcare providers are becoming open to the fact that we truly are individuals. And so there's not one prescription that you can write for everyone. And so being open to showing people data, and all data is not out of a journal. So I love reading medical journals. More are actually publishing about fasting now, so that makes me happy. But you also have to take people's experiences. And so don't just discount someone who tells you, I used to be 350 pounds and I changed my diet and this is what I did. And now I don't have X, Y, and Z anymore. I mean, we have to be open-minded to getting information from all sorts of places. But it's just going to take time, I think. We didn't get to this diet overnight, and there's a lot of money and industry behind it and other things. And so we're not going to get rid of the S.A.D diet overnight either. But I think just by continuing to show people your results and continuing to talk about it, I think that helps reach people, a person at a time. And
There's
then,
one I'd love to mention. You said the research. There's one article in particular I love. If you Google 23 studies on low carb and low fat diets, time to retire the fad. And it's one of the best articles. It's written by Chris Gunner. And he compares 23 studies comparing low carb to low fat, and it's on obesity, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and they measured weight loss, cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood sugar levels. And 22 of the 23 showed that low carb beat out low fat, and except for one where the results were the same. And every single one, the overall blood markers improved in every single metric. So, if you just Google that, you'll find the article. It's on Healthline.
okay.
And that's something that you can send to, your colleagues if they're questioning, like, these are 23 studies,
Right.
unequivocally proving that low carb is more effective than low fat.
And the problem is too, when at least from what I've seen, when people try to go low fat, they overcompensate with a bunch of processed foods. And so, I mean, that in itself is not a great thing. So, yeah, I mean, don't fear the fat, but people, like I said, sometimes people are stubborn, and so you just have to. I think at least, when I started fasting, I was like one of my only colleagues doing it. So, I mean, everyone was like, what is she doing? She's starving herself and blah, 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 blah. And then, 50 pounds later, then people are like, oh, okay, wait. So tell me about this intermittent fasting thing. So, I mean, I think, over time, your results will speak for itself.
Yes.
And then people will eventually come back to you. That's what I've noticed, at least also.
100%.
You've answered this already, I think. How much meat is good to eat a day? Carnivore literally means only meat. So you've already touched on basically when you're first going carnivore, you're going to eat as much meat until your body tells you to stop, until you're full.
Yeah.
And then carnivore literally means only meat. And you answered that. Pretty much yes, but you can some protocols do allow for dairy. That you just kind of have to see how dairy affects you, I'm assuming, and whether or not you want to keep it or cut it.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Gabrielle Lyon has a really great reference. She says, like, shoot to get 30 grams of protein at each meal if you're eating 3 times a day.
Okay.
So that means, if you're only eating twice a day, it's more like 45 grams of protein per meal. And that's where she's found, having studied protein and amino acids for most of her career, she's found that that's the amount needed to reach a threshold for muscle protein synthesis. But that's if you want to calculate things, you want to track things. The best part to me about carnivore is you don't track anything. You basically just, you're like, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. And then when you're full and the food is no longer appealing, you move on. And there's just not a lot of, complication to it. There's not a lot of, like, your body will tell you when it's hungry, and when it's
Mm-hmm.
full, the food will no longer be appealing to you. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll be fully satisfied, and you probably won't think about food for at least 5 or 6 hours. If you're thinking about food an hour or two later, you didn't have enough. So, you
Okay.
want to get to that point where you're just like, I ate my meal, and food did not enter my consciousness until
Mm-hmm.
the meal time. And even then, sometimes you have to go, okay, it's dinner time now.
Right.
Um, so that I think those are some like little guidelines you can use to help identify how much to eat.
Um, let's see how someone asked, how do you make keto carnivore work post bariatric surgery? Fasting gets really hard because of the small volumes of food fitting into your stomach when eating. Can't go many hours without eating or without ending up being hypocaloric in a negative way. Please help. And your podcast is awesome. I agree. Your podcast is awesome.
Thank you.
um, so yeah, I've worked with, I haven't done carnivore with anyone post bariatric surgery, but I have worked with people post bariatric surgery with fasting, and it definitely can be tricky because with the rewiring and all of that of the bowel. Um, so in terms of the small volume foods, what I try to work with people on is just making sure that those volumes are nutrient dense, so that you can space out between the meals and stop eating as frequently. Um, but some people, and it depends on which surgery you had, right? So you'll have some people who've had the band, some people who have like the full Roux-en-Y, other people won't have necessarily the full Roux-en-Y, and they just have like the latter part of it. So I mean, there's different types, and it depends on which one you've had. If you've had more of a restrictive procedure, then yes, the small meals definitely are a thing that you have to combat, but try to make sure that they're nutrient dense and then start slowly spacing your meals. So, like for instance, if you feel like you're having to eat every couple hours because they're so small volume, first your goal is just to space them 3 hours apart and make sure to add things like olive oil to your food so that you're getting a little more caloric density there before you actually switch up your foods altogether. And then you're slowly able to stretch that period of time. But it can be a process, especially the more restrictive the procedure is, excuse me. Have you had anyone that's tried carnivore that that was post like bariatric surgery? Like, 'cause I just haven't had anybody, so I
No,
don't.
only keto, and but I have had people just say overall that, because I consider carnivore a subset of keto because they're both
Mhm.
like carb restriction, they're both based on
True.
carb restriction. But both people say that it's like the ideal way to eat because the food's so nutrient dense that, you can have
Mhm.
small meals. I just wouldn't stress or worry so much about the fasting component because your
Right.
your glycogen levels are going to be low, your liver glycogen is going to be low because you're not eating carbs. You're going to be getting so many benefits if you're doing carnivore from just not eating carbs. So I wouldn't worry about also layering fasting into that. Like it just sounds like a lot and not necessary.
Right. And especially if you're going to prioritize your foods, you can just like, even as you mentioned before, stretching out, not fasting per se, but I see a lot of people who it's like every couple hours, they feel like they have to eat something. And so that's why we'll start with just even lengthening a little bit between the meals. but maybe not ever trying to tackle like a 16-hour fast or a 24-hour fast. Because I agree, if you can only eat small portions, you need to make those small portions count. And enough for an individual, maybe just that break between meals. So, I mean, that's a good point. I think a lot of times, whenever we start a new lifestyle, we want to throw like the whole kitchen sink at our bodies at once. And so, I think it's important to try some things and then build on top of that rather than saying all at once, I'm going to do this, I'm cutting out this, and I'm going to fast for 20 hours, and I'm going to do, I'm going to join a gym and all the, do it piecemeal and allow your body to adapt to the new way of eating that you're embarking, and then add new layers on top of that as you go. Which is why I think the whole health transformation, it's a process that happens over years. And I just don't think people realize that. Like me, I'm still learning new things and playing around with my diet and playing around with my fasting schedule and my sleep schedule and activity and all of these things, and learning new things about what makes me work optimal each and every day. And I just feel like that's going to be something that continues lifelong.
Absolutely.
Um, I've been fasting for a bit of weight loss, but haven't seen any results. Went from 16 to hour fast to 22-hour fast. Not sure what's wrong. Um, that's one that probably is a bit of beyond like the scope just individually, but things that you can try. I always ask people to go back to the basics. What are your fasting fluids? Because sometimes you think you're fasting, but you're not really.
Yep.
Um, and then during your eating window, what's your nutrition like? What are you prioritizing? And then make sure to look at other stressors in your life beyond what you're putting in your mouth, because again, we know sleep, chronic stress, all of those things affect cortisol, and that can impact your weight loss as well.
Yeah, I think your point there is really big, because I know for myself for years I thought I was fasting when I was like also having bone broth and also having some, coffee with cream in it, just a
Yeah.
splash, and that's not fasting, because I didn't really get the actual results from fasting until I realized it was just water.
Yep.
Just water only, and or adding in some sodium or electrolytes, those are fine, but anything that is like a food or tastes like food, um, you're not going to be fasting. Your body's not going to be deriving all the benefits that you get, that are, we see touted and explained so much. There's so many benefits of fasting, but it took me years to realize that
Hmm.
I wasn't truly fasting unless it was just water and salt.
Right.
I think that that's a really, really great point you brought up there.
And the thing is, too, like we've talked earlier about the benefits of bone broth, and I love making bone broth, but just realize, include that in your eating window. So we're
Yeah.
not saying that you can't have some of these wonderful, nutritious, fasting fluids, you know, but you need to be realistic and just count it that is in your eating window. For
Exactly.
people who can't give up coffee without cream or different additives, you know, I don't want you to be miserable. Have your coffee, just put your coffee in your eating window,
Yeah.
and then when you're fasting, have water. And I do think that's kind of your safest bet. And you'll be, people think it's not a huge change, but once people do that, then they're like, oh, the scale is moving again. And it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I forgot to mention in terms of calories, just make sure that you're getting enough calories, because I find a lot of people come from the traditional diet mentality when they start fasting. And so they're fasting and doing like really big caloric restriction. And those I find don't work well together. And so sometimes people are shocked when I ask them to track and I'll see that they're maybe at like 800 calories a day. And I'm encouraging them, no, I want you to get your calories up. And they're like, what? But then the scale also starts moving again. So again, if you're going to fast, you need to make sure that you are fueling yourself appropriately in the interim. And that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Like when you fast, when you feast, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people who would say, I fast every day until noon. And then in the morning, I have my coffee with cream or MCT oil or whatever. And I'm like, but then you had a meal. Like that's a meal. If you put butter or cream or MCT or anything in that coffee, it's a meal. It's just a liquid meal. So you didn't fast. And I don't know why it takes so long for us to realize that. But I mean, this is like, yeah, like you said, fasting fluids got to be just water, electrolytes. That's it.
Hey guys, I think Instagram is acting up. We were just chatting and then it kicked us off and then we couldn't get back on. So we were going to see, I'm going to see if Vanessa can join and we'll just wrap it up. And then we will see here. Oh, she just got on here. Let me see about the Instagram acts up. It like went crazy.
Hey.
Hey, I don't know what happened. I think Instagram I think there's a limit for joint talks for an hour, but then it was acting glitchy. I don't know. Sometimes Instagram doesn't always work well.
Yeah, when I got back on, everyone was saying they couldn't hear me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what happened because when I joined back on your page too, I couldn't hear you, but I wasn't sure if it was my Instagram, so I don't know. It's just technology. Can't live with it, but can't live without it, you know.
Yeah.
But I will say for people so I think, let me go with my other phone. I have my husband's phone and I'm using his, but let me go to your page and see if the chat saved in your, like if it's on your replay.
Oh, it did let me do that.
Okay, perfect. Oh, look, I hear myself talking. Okay, I'll have to try that later. I'm like, I'm going to your page. But
it says
so what we'll
it's
do,
going to
guys,
be available soon.
It will be available. Okay, perfect. So there is an app. The app is actually, in case anyone wants it or is interested, it's called Record It. And so it's a great app. It's a little bootleg, but what it does is if you play something from your screen, you can save the video and it'll convert it, into like an audio video file. So I will go back and once it's available in your stories, I'll just replay it on my phone and I'll record it. So then that way you have it. And then that way, guys, we can post it later so that if you tuned in late or if you missed some of the questions, we've covered a ton of stuff. And so that way you'll be able to have it as a reference, especially if you're interested in learning more about carnivore. I know I learned so much just from the hour that we talked. So again, I encourage people to, be open-minded, really realize that what we put into our bodies truly affects our health, and don't be afraid to manipulate your diet to find out what works for you.
Yes, I 100% agree. And, if you try it out for a week, I tried it out for a week at first, and then I wanted to try it for a month. And, it's people talk about it as this really extreme, dangerous thing. It's like if you've ever done an egg fast, you've done carnivore. That's all it is. Like you're just eating the foods that you would normally eat, just without the added sides and things. So it's an elimination protocol, just like fasting is, and it can be a tool that you use. Then you go back to keto, or it can be something that you find, well, I just feel great on this and I want to do it. And if you do it well and you get you know, nutrient dense foods in there, and you make sure to eat like nose to tail, you won't have nutritional deficiencies, because your body is mostly made out of protein and fat, and we
Exactly. No, I think that's a great point. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for chatting with me. I am gonna go check on the, newly homeschooled kiddos now. But we definitely should do this again in the
absolutely.
future. I think just you being able to educate people more is always a great thing. And everyone, stay safe, healthy, stay home.
Yes.
And yeah, you guys we'll get through this together. And all this is just temporary, but it's a great time to experiment with fasting and carnivore. So, don't think about all the stuff that you can't do while we're having to stay at home. Think about all of the other things that you can do. And the fact that you may not have some of the workplace temptations now is a great time to think about trying a new way of eating. So,
Yes. And I saw there were some questions about weight loss and carnivore. The podcast episode of Fast Keto that I put out yesterday, on Thursday. So the most recent episode is just about weight loss and carnivore, if you want to go and listen to that. And like you said, if people can watch the replay of the live as well. If you go to my profile and click on my profile picture, you can watch, if you click on story and you watch live, you can watch the live replay of the whole episode that we just did, answering all the questions about breaking fast and carnivore and different fasting protocols.
yep, nope, that's perfect. That'd be a great resource. And then for anyone who's interested, just to let you know, starting next Wednesday, you'll see me posting it in my stories, but starting next Wednesday, I'm inviting people to join me with 30 days of fasting, not a 30-day fast. 30 days of fasting. And then we're going to combine it with doing some squats and other lower body exercises that you can do around the house to, again, try to keep our mood up and just encourage during this time when we may not be able to interact with some of our family and friends. This is something that you can do with your family and friends virtually to kind of keep us, going and motivated during this time. So if you follow, I'll type it here, starting Wednesday, if you follow the hashtag fast squat fast, you can join along and do as much or as little as you like. But that's all I have coming up right now in the next few weeks. But you guys make sure, like Vanessa said, check out Fast Keto Podcast, and you can learn more about not only carnivore and weight loss, but she has a ton of topics, anything biohacking related. Just make sure to definitely check out and start to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me to the live, and yeah, look forward to doing another one with you soon.
All right. You take care.
You too. Bye for now. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye, everyone.